Greetings, everyone. I have the honor today of introducing today's keynote speaker, LE&RN spokesperson and Academy Award winner, Kathy Bates. I know Kathy will be thanking her Canadian Lymphedema Framework hosts, but I do want to personally thank ILF President Professor Christine Moffat for our recent collaborations of asking me to speak at the ILF in Copenhagen, and also for asking me to pen the foreword to the ILF special issue of LE&RN's official journal, Lymphatic Research and Biology. Christine, thank you so much. I first met Kathy Bates in 2014 while she was filming in New York City, and about 2 hours into our discussing LE&RN and the idea of becoming a spokesperson, she got up and said, well, this has all been very interesting, Bill, but really I'm not quite ready to become a spokesperson, I don't think. This is all very new to me. She was still suffering from the psychological as well as the physical effects of having lymphedema, but she said, you've given me a lot to think about. And she said, but now I have to go and do a television program. I asked Kathy, what TV show are you actually doing? And she said, oh, I'm doing an episode of Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens on the Bravo Network. And I tapped my head and said, Andy lives upstairs from me. And I ran into Andy in the elevator yesterday and asked him to be the first member of LE&RN's honorary board. And he said, sure, Bill, whatever I can do to help. Kathy stared at me and then said, that's the sign. That's the sign. I was meant to be LE&RN's spokesperson. And we took off from there. First, Kathy took the time to read and learn as much as she could. Then, the meeting started with the American Medical Association, NIH, the CDC, and with speaking engagements at a number of conferences. Kathy would be with us on Capitol Hill, walking miles through the tunnels to meet with countless legislators and making a case for the National Commission on Lymphatic Diseases, opening the Department of Defense for research funds for lymphatics, and broadening insurance coverage for lymphedema. She would become the face of the World Lymphedema Day campaign and film the CDC's first video about lymphedema, which is now on their website. And then there were the multitude of patients whom she comforts and whose stories she took to heart. There are very few celebrities who are willing to tie themselves to a disease, and even fewer who become true spokespersons invested in a cause. It is my honor today to introduce a true champion for the cause of lymphedema and all lymphatic diseases. Please welcome Miss Kathy Bates.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. And special thanks to CLF board member and conference co-chairs David Keast, Dr. Catherine McQuaig, and also Dr. Margie McNeely and Tracy Gardy-Kiotis. I also want to thank conference committee chair Anna Kennedy, editor of your brilliant magazine, Pathways, who first reached out to LE&RN with this invitation. Also, I want to recognize the chairs and boards of the provincial lymphedema associations who work so hard advocating for better provincial health care for lymphedema patients. The dedication and hard work of the Canadian Lymphedema Framework has fueled the activism that has united our communities across North America. And let me commend you for creating, in concert with the University of Alberta, clinical practice guidelines for breast cancer-related lymphedema. And I congratulate you on your online learning series that brings healthcare professionals research-based lymphedema education. As LE&RN's spokesperson, I'd like to recognize our Canadian collaborators who inspired the establishment of World Lymphedema Day. Now listen, the University of Calgary will be hosting LE&RN and NAVBO's 2022 Lymphatic Forum Research Conference, so please join us. And finally, I send a shout out to our friends at the Lymphedema Association of Quebec who are sharing their expertise with LE&RN on a new project. Félicitations pour tout ce que vous avez accompli. En effet, nous sommes plus forts ensemble, non? Ta belle Provence me manque énormément. What we have accomplished has supplanted the sense I had at the beginning that any progress was hopeless, for myself or others. Now I want to tell you about how I developed lymphedema and how I live with it today. In the summer of 2012, I had a bilateral mastectomy. I was very concerned about developing lymphedema. I was dating a man who survived 4th stage melanoma, thanks to a grueling experimental regimen that saved his life, but left him with lymphedema in one arm. He was so fed up with doctors that he refused to get treatment for it, and as a result, every day his arm swelled to twice its size. He wrapped it in ace bandages. The skin was thick, like the texture of wood, and I was terrified that would be my fate. So when I met with my breast cancer surgeon, I begged him, if the sentinel node is clear, please don't take any more lymph nodes than you have to. I reminded him at every pre-op visit. And while recovering in the hospital, I felt strange pains and tingling in my hands. And I thought maybe my hands were sore from the intravenous tubes in my veins. But I started to worry. And then at my first checkup, my surgeon told me he had removed 18 nodes from my left armpit and 3 from my right. I went ballistic, screaming, crying, snarling at him for what he'd done. He kept shouting, "I cured you of cancer! I cured you of cancer!" But I shoved everyone away. I ran out of the examination room, down the elevator, and out of the building. And on the street, I just stood there. It was the middle of July. It was boiling hot. I was hugging the pillow they gave me to support the drains that were inserted in my chest. I was too weak to go anywhere. I don't remember my friends coming or putting me in the car or getting me home and into bed. I sank into a deep depression. I stayed in my room with the curtains closed, and my arms began to swell. I was filled with rage and resentment. I went back for checkups with the other surgeon who had closed up my wounds. He looked up on the internet to see who might treat lymphedema. And at the time, I didn't understand why a surgeon at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country wouldn't have already known someone. Her name was Dr. Emily Eicher, and she practices in Santa Monica. After recovering from surgery, I went to see her. And by this time, I could only fit into men's shirts. She listened patiently as I poured out my sad tale, and then she said brightly in her Czech accent, "That is all in the past. Have a glass of champagne, and we will begin your new life." She said she had a patient who was 105, always glamorous in Chanel, and everyone went to her for stock market advice. And I thought, dear God, if I live to be that old, I'll have to stay like this for another 40 years. And then Emily showed me her swollen leg. And during her medical training, she developed lymphedema after surgery for cancer. And that's when she decided to specialize in the treatment of the disease. Seeing her leg and hearing her talk about what she had to do every morning and night to take care of it, and how she had to stand on it all day to do her work, made me realize that, in comparison, I didn't have it so bad. I have mild bilateral lymphedema. I had cellulitis once and ended up in the hospital. I have to wear my sleeves when flying or after treatments. After I lost 60 pounds, the swelling in my arms isn't as bad. But if I overdo it, they swell up and the pain is terrible. I have to realize that I do have lymphedema. I will always have it. However, since I have it easy compared to most of us, I'm uncomfortable about my being my own advocate. I can afford my treatments and garments. I don't have to worry about how I'll get to an appointment or having to wait for one. I don't have the right to complain. However, it's been challenging to protect myself at work. And even though I explain my disability to directors, they just don't get it because they can't see it. Because to them, my arms look normal. Sometimes they ask me to do things I haven't expected to do on the day we're about to shoot. For example, on American Horror Story, I told them, no, sorry, I'm unable to use a bullwhip in that scene because I have lymphedema in my arms. And then I told them all about lymphedema, and they nod, and I think they're getting it. And the morning I arrived, there stood a bullwhip instructor. I told him I wasn't able to do it, but he wouldn't listen. He was all fired up about teaching me to use this awesome bullwhip, and look how fast they go, and did you know the crack is as loud as a sonic boom? I'm an actor. I'm paid to do what they ask. You don't want to cause a problem and have the producer coming down to ask, what's the problem? You don't want word to get around that, well, she can't do this and she can't do that, or she's difficult to work with, so maybe next time we should get somebody else for the part. So I finally gave in and learned how to use the damn whip. But when we started shooting, my compression sleeves showed below the cuffs of my costume, so the dresser had to keep pushing the sleeves further and further up my arms. And by the time I got home, my right arm was huge. The veins were bulging. I was terrified I had done something I couldn't fix. In the morning, my arm was better, still inflamed and swollen, but I had to go in. The schedule is like a jigsaw puzzle. It's constantly shifting, and it moves like a juggernaut. We all depend on each other. We push through 14, 16-hour days. You show up unless it's a life-threatening emergency. Between scenes, I sat and I hung my arm from a C-stand, which is what the camera grips use to clamp their diffusers and flags on to filter the lights. But finally, I had to call the production manager to come to set, and they agreed to let me go home. He apologized for not understanding about the whip. I was despondent because I just started to work with LE&RN. And I thought, boy, if I can't get the people I work with, the people I love, who love me, to understand this, how in the world am I going to get anybody else to understand, much less do something about it? Emily roped me into meeting Bill Rapisi, the CEO of LE&RN, the fiercest man I know. We met in New York in 2015, and as we sat in the lobby of my hotel, he told me 10 million Americans suffer with lymphedema, more than ALS, MS, muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's, and AIDS combined, that it is incurable, that it is progressive, that children are born with lymphedema, and that they constantly fight life-threatening infections, that doctors in 4 years of medical school spend only 15 minutes studying the lymphatic system, that patients suffer for years without the proper diagnosis, while their disease gets worse and worse, that some consider suicide, that some succeed. I was gobsmacked. I had no idea the enormity of the problem. I told Bill it was rare for me to loan my name to an organization, much less sign on as a spokesperson, but I told him I'd give it a try. I thought it would be Bill and me against the world. I never realized that countless researchers and physicians had been studying lymphedema and lymphatic diseases for decades. Bill began to send me emails he received daily from people with lymphedema. I was deeply moved by their stories, and to know their names, to see their faces. One after another, they poured out their despair and frustrations with the medical community, begging for us to help them. I marveled at their courage, and my empathy grew deeper with every story. And one of the first emails I got was from a young man, a Canadian, by the name of Andrew Mata. He had just begun studying to become a pharmacist when he woke up one morning in agony to find his foot and ankle swollen to the size of a grapefruit. He spent months crawling between his bed and the washroom while researching for help on the internet. And finally, he opted for experimental surgery in Italy, only to be told afterward that it would be 5 years before he would know if it was successful. Andrew became a pharmacist, and one day in came a woman, a regular at the drugstore whom no one wanted to deal with because of her foul temper. Andrew recognized she had lymphedema. He saw a human being who was profoundly hurt and alone, just as he had been. He told her his story, and as he described the pain and fear that had overwhelmed him, she saw herself in him. Her need to strike out at the world melted. She shared her story with Andrew, and there came about a healing between them. As my favorite playwright Tennessee Williams put it, Sometimes there's God so quickly. Andrew became the first chair of LE&RN Canada. Karen Bingham, who hails from one of my favorite places in the world, Nova Scotia, wrote us that she and all of her siblings suffer from severe lymphedema in their legs. She decided that people needed to know about lymphedema, so she posted photos of her legs online. And when she got hateful comments, instead of hiding, she went to the newspapers with it. When she was warned by her doctor never to exercise, as it would make the swelling worse, she decided she wasn't going to spend the rest of her life lying around. So she found a trainer who worked within her limitations to learn kickboxing. One of the most thrilling photos I have is of Karen kicking the crap out of her trainer's mitt. Karen, you're my hero. Karen is the founder and president of LE&RN, the Lymphedema Association of Nova Scotia. Steve Kelland of Ottawa sent us a photo of himself posing in front of the mountain he was just about to climb after undergoing years of rigorous self-imposed treatments for his life-threatening primary lymphedema. He believes that advocacy must be active to succeed, and he has been instrumental in giving men a voice in the battle against LE. Stephen is currently chair of LE&RN Canada. As a spokesperson, the first thing I wanted to do was reach out to Dr. James Madara, head of the AMA. But sadly, the group has turned a blind eye to our predicament. Just recently, Bill asked hundreds of our advocates to send emails to Dr. Madara in recounting their personal stories and asking for help. To date, not one person has received a response from him. Not one. You know, it's just my opinion, but if I were a surgeon, I would hate to think that in saving a patient's life, I had damaged them with an incurable disease. I would want to learn new skills to prevent lymphedema from occurring, or at the very least, make sure my patients get the best care immediately. I don't want to paint the medical community with a broad brush here. I meet many doctors who do know about lymphedema. A few years ago, we had to beg the CDC to put a page on their website about lymphedema and lymphatic diseases. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that LE&RN was just awarded a 3-year grant from the CDC to create a national lymphedema awareness campaign for both health professionals and the general public. Our lobby days in Washington, D.C. continue to bear fruit. The U.S. Congress is directing the NIH to establish a national commission on lymphatic diseases, as well as a funding category for lymphedema. I'd like to say a few words about Bill. Over the years, he's taught me that real courage means never giving up. In fact, you don't know what the word never means if you haven't met Bill Rapisi. From the beginning, his strategy was to rally marginalized individuals to find our voices, share our stories, and create a community, a movement that would enlighten and transform society's disregard for us. Bill spearheaded LE&RN's Centers of Excellence in the diagnosis and treatment of lymphatic disease. There are now 40 designated centers worldwide, including the lymphedema program at McGill University Health Center in Montreal. The new Boston Lymphatic Center is a joint program between Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Boston Children's Hospital, teaching affiliates of Harvard Medical School. The Center for Lymphatic and Venous Disorders at Stanford University is directed by Dr. Stanley Roxon, founding chair of LE&RN's Scientific Medical Advisory Council. And there are centers of excellence at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, the Cleveland Clinic, and so many more around the world. I am deeply grateful for my good fortune, for the surgeon who did save my life so I can be with you today. Wouldn't you know I had to go in for hernia surgery, and of course, he was the expert in that as well. So we made up. He's a good egg, and I wager I may have to see him again someday. I'm grateful I said yes to Bill. Honored to have met the doctors, researchers, therapists, and my fellow patient advocates who have created the successes we celebrate today. I'm proud to stand with them, with you, as we continue to work for a cure for lymphedema and all lymphatic diseases. I never imagined that which brought me so much pain has brought me so much joy. LE&RN is the perfect acronym for our organization, because together we're teaching the world about our disease, explaining what exactly lymphedema is, explaining what we have to do each day to manage our symptoms and infections, how often many of us have had to abandon cherished dreams and accept another path in life defined by the limits of our disease. Our stories have the power to touch the hearts of those we meet, and they're within like the fires of empathy. Our pain is our power because it creates empathy, the most powerful force on this planet. I don't know about you, but when I tell our stories, I feel their power. Power over our hopelessness, our frustration with uneducated physicians and delayed diagnoses, power over our fear, our despair, our self-hatred, power over utter aloneness. For in empathy with one another, we cannot be alone. In closing, I'd like to share the last sentence of the first email I received at the beginning of my journey with LE&RN. It was written by one of your countrymen, a man of singular vision. And through these years, it has been the secret motto on my battle flag. Andrew Mata wrote, "We are about to change the world." And so we are, Andrew. So we are. Thank you.